All right, so now I'm going to kind of demonstrate, demonstrate my method for seating bullets in a case. And this kind of is going to go into that area where you've heard me say many times that I feel that some aspects of loading ammunition are voodoo. And this is kind of a demonstration of what I mean by that. And I don't mean that it's some sort of magic or some sort of black art or something like that that we're doing here. But with certain aspects of it, all reloaders do things their way. There are certain things in their equipment setup. There are certain things in their process, steps that they do. And they do it that way because hopefully they're getting good, consistent results at the range when they test their ammunition. So it really doesn't matter what you do or what order you do them in to a certain extent, aside from adhering strictly to the manufacturer's published powder charges and things like that for the various loads that you're working on, which you never want to vary from ever. Stick to your powder charges. Read your manuals. Have more than one manual. Check them on the internet. Do not take reloading data from some GURB in a reloading forum or other source on the internet where somebody's just punching out information and posting it. Do never ever take that information. Don't take loading data from some nut job that makes TikTok videos. Okay, don't. Check your data. All right, as far as powder charges and things like that. But some of the rest of it is very much up to you. It's your style. Loading ammunition, like arrow making or lure making or fly tying, it's very much an art. There's a process, there's a science to it, but then there's other parts of it that are kind of to your own discretion. And this is one of those areas that I can demonstrate very easily some of my feelings and theories about that. And I apologize for the lighting situation here today. I have a light on my press, but you can see when I turn that light on, it's way too bright. It overwhelms the camera. And so the light's great for me, but it's not great for the camera because it just completely disrupts the shot. So I'm trying to make do with the light that we have here, more or less. So anyway, so we have a loaded case that we've checked several times. Checked it, came out perfect on the scale. Now we've checked it before we put it in the press, and we have our bullet. And so that brings me to the voodoo. So you have this press, right? You have this press, you have this die, all right? You have this case, and you have this ram with the shell holder on top of it. And you're gonna put all those things together and jam this case up in there with a bullet, and it's gonna be right. Well, okay, yes and no. All of these things, the die, all right, even the bullet, even the case, your ram, your shell holder, which is what sits on top of the ram, fits in there, and the case rim snaps into that. Hold it while you do all this. All that is supposed to be straight and round and true, right? Because that's what we want. Rifle barrels are supposed to be straight and round and true because we want to shoot straight and true. But the fact of the matter is, none of these things are perfectly straight, perfectly round, or perfectly true. Not one of them, okay? They're all off microscopically. And so it's kind of a cascading situation where if your case for whatever reason isn't straight, and for some reason your die isn't cut straight, and the threads are off a little bit, and it's off microscopically, and you just simply rely on all of that, and you put your bullets in. Well, if your case and your bullet maybe aren't exactly round and straight, all that stuff being not round and straight, you're going to end up with something that's a little crooked every time, and so that's going to obviously detract from your accuracy shooting crooked bullets. And again, they're all crooked to one extent or another. It just can't be avoided. They're very, very close. You can measure it with these different runout gauges and stuff like that, and guys will talk about runout all day long, make you just want to turn blue in the face listening to about runout. I don't care about runout. What I care about is what happens on the paper. All right, when I see those holes in the paper, that's my runout. Okay, the holes in the paper are on top of each other. That's fine. And so this is what I do to kind of get there. First is the setup of my die and my press. Very good die, right? It's a Reading die. It's not the greatest die. It's a good die, very good die. We can assume that it's as straight can be and as round can be without spending $300 or $400 on a die. Okay, great. And so where I kind of get into the aspect of doing what I do the way I do it, and this was not my idea. I got this off the internet somewhere. All of these dies here all these presses where the shell holder fits in the ram, there's usually a metal spring that holds that. You clip it in, it goes in very, very tightly, and it holds it. All right, holds it very, very tightly so it doesn't move, and you run it up into the die, and it doesn't move, or moves very little. Okay, well, what if that whole situation is not straight and not round? All right, and you're jamming it up in there every time. Again, it's straight and it's round enough, but it may not be perfect. Okay, so what I do, and again, this is not my idea. I got this off the internet years and years ago. To replace that stiff clip here that holds your shell holder, which holds your case, which holds your bullet, which ends up being up into the seating die, I replace that. I take that out of most of my dies and I replace it with a rubber gasket. Okay, and the rubber gasket just goes in and takes the place of the metal clip. Obviously, the rubber gasket is much more flexible and gives you a lot more play than the metal clip, and puts a lot more play into this whole situation. A lot of your dies are set up with the exact same idea in there. They're made so that the inside has play in it as that bullet's being seated. And so this down here, what I've done by putting the case in this way with this rubber gasket holding things instead of the metal clip, and I have a case or I have a die over here with a in a press that is held by a metal clip, and that die does different jobs, and it really doesn't matter. And I wish I would have thought and I would show you, but that particular shell holder is held very, very stiff in the die over there, or in the press over there, whereas this one has a lot of play in it. And so this particular bullet seater also has a bit of play in it as that bullet goes up in there, and the play is in there. The play is in there so that as this is all being put together, everything can kind of find its own center as it's going up there, and so that way, even if it's a little off one way or another as you're seating that bullet, it can kind of move around a little bit as it's going up in the die, and the die and the case holder and the ram and the case and the bullet, they all can kind of find their own center because of this flexibility that's built into the bullet seating die and it's built now into the case. Everything can kind of move around, and if it starts off a little wonky and crooked or a little bit out of round or whatever, the flexibility built into the system now allows it to kind of find its own center, and that's better than forcing it into a center that is maybe off or crooked or not in line. If you're allowing it to find its own center, they'll kind of find the same center every time. It'll be a lot closer to being true on center. That's my theory. Okay, it seems to work. Again, the holes in the target tell the story. And so something else that I do, although what I was talking about before kind of has more to do with things being in line, whether this ram is perfectly in line with the die, which is perfectly in line with the case holder, which is perfectly in line with the case and the bullet, and the bullet seating stem. So the flexibility that's built into the case, or built into the bullet seating die and built into the case holder, allows it to all kind of find its own center as that pressure is being applied onto the press. So what I do is I sit the bullet in there, run it up until it touches the seating stem, until it stops against the seating stem. Seating stem is the piece up in here, which is going to force that bullet down into the case. And what I do is I simply run it just enough to get it started. Okay, so now that bullet is started into the case, but it's not seated. Okay, it's down in the case, but it's not seated. All right, so what I do then, and again, this rubber gasket setup enables me to do some of this very, very easily. I will turn the case with the bullet 90 degrees. And again, what I'm doing here is if anything is out around, as we pushed it up in there, if that bullet's not round, the case is not round, maybe the die is not round exactly, this is kind of splitting the difference. Okay, this, when I push it up in this next time, it'll force it back. It'll force everything back the other way. If it was out around one way, now by having turned that 90 degrees, it will force it back as we seat it a little further, and not all the way. Not all the way. It will kind of push everything back toward a middle ground somewhere. Yeah, if it was out of whack one way, I've turned it. Now as I run it up in there again, it'll push it back the other way. And again, everything's flexing. Everything's kind of finding its own center. Then what I do the last time, the bullet's not seated yet, I just turn the bullet by itself. Why? I don't know. This is just the way I do it. I just turn the bullet. I try to leave the seating, the case holder where it is. I turn the bullet another 90 degrees, and I run it up again, and have it sit down as to where it's supposed to be. All right, and so there is a seated bullet, and what we're going for here. I don't know if you're gonna be able to read this or if it'll even turn out right. But I measure the bullet in my bullet comparator in my calipers, and I'm shooting for 2.625 is the length we're going to today. And there we go. We got, I don't know if you can read that, 6.625 right on the button. And now it's not right on the button necessarily because I did all that monkey business. Okay, it's just right on the button because I fooled with it, and it's a good die, and it's a good press, and it will make the length pretty much right, more or less every time. All that monkey business is just to try and make sure that that bullet is going to line up in the chamber with the bore of the rifle as straight and as centered as possible. The rifle may be off too. The case could be the case chamber, the cartridge chamber in the rifle could be cut crooked, could be cut not round. Barrel could be not round. Parts of the barrel could be not round. Parts of the barrel could not be straight. It's not a perfect science, and that's why I say some of this is voodoo. You're just trying to come to the middle somewhere, get it all to sort of kind of line up. That's why you shoot, that's why you shoot cases, or I only shoot cases that were fired in my rifle. I have a 130-06. I only shoot cases, where the first time they haven't been fired in my rifle, but after that, they're all fired in the same rifle. So the cases are kind of shaped to that chamber, shaped to that throat of that rifle, and that helps them to match up a little bit. Then by doing some of this other nonsense with fooling around with, putting, rubber gaskets in here so this moves around, buying good dies that are built with a bullet seating system that allows it to kind of wiggle back and forth a little bit and find its own center. And it's just so everything will hopefully end up center, that the center of the case ends up with the center of the bullet, ends up with the center of the neck. When you put it in the rifle, it's the center of the chamber, it's the center of the barrel for the most part. And again, it's all what shows up on paper. And I'm going to take just a lot of bullets out that I'm working on here through this reloading process, and I'm going to shoot them at the range. I've been promising you a range session with that 30-06, and so that's how we're going to get this done. We're going to jump from here with our finished bullets, and we're going to jump out to the range on a next video, and we'll see what happens on paper. Either it works or it doesn't. I've been doing this a long time. Usually it works pretty well. Sometimes it doesn't. But then again, you just got to kind of figure out and go back and what can you do to make it work. All of our measurements, you're trying to be as precise as possible. What I have, my setup, and again, this is not my idea. I got this idea from Eric Cortina, who's a great rifle competitor and overall genius, and hand loader, rifle maker, other equipment maker. He makes his own recoil brakes and rifle tuning brakes and all kinds of good stuff that he makes. Is to run 2 sets of calipers at your bench at all times. And the reason I do this is because we take 2 measurements generally on a cartridge. We take a measurement from the base of the cartridge to the shoulder up here as we're resizing it, and that measurement's measured by this caliber with the longer comparator. The comparator is just a piece of equipment that you hook up to your calipers, zero it out, and it will measure by putting the bullet into that. Instead of measuring it with just the calipers alone, you're able to measure certain aspects of this case, and this enables us to measure the length from base to shoulder with this caliper, with this comparator in it. So I have that set up, in one set of calipers, and then the other set of calipers, it measures the bullet ogive, which is where we end up once we, what I just showed you, that 2.625, that's where that measurement came from, measuring it with the bullet comparator. And the reason I have two is otherwise, if you don't have two, you're always switching. You're always taking one comparator out and putting in the other one in a set of calipers, and the calipers, you know, as you make the switches, you could be changing it a little bit. It could be different every time. That's why I have two of the comparator bases. I bought those a long time ago, and you know, I thought, oh, okay, you know, that's a good setup. To use the same base all the time, and just switch out the comparators. Okay, well that's good enough, but you know, when you're in the course of switching, you could be putting it back in there different. It could be out of line, it could be out of round, it could be not straight, it could be, you know, who knows what. You might have a little chunk of dirt in there, or some debris or some grime, and it makes the measurement different, and you want to keep the measurement the same as possible. So by clamping the case comparator into one set of calipers and clamping the bullet comparator into another separate set of calipers and never taking them out, I'm hopefully getting the same measurements all the time. Now these calipers could be very, very different. Again, they could be offline, they could be off in their measurements. It's got the electronic measuring doohickeys on there, you know, those could be off. But at least by not changing them out and swapping them around all the time, I'm always getting this, hopefully the same measurement, even if it might be off, not exactly on, at least it's the same all the time. And the same with this one, you know, the bullet comparator is going to be the same all the time because it's in the exact same set of calibers, and it's never changed, it's never moved. And so even though it might not be exactly perfect, and I'm quite sure that if you did swap them around and measured the same bullet or the same cartridge, you'd get different measurements slightly, a couple hundreds, a couple thousands maybe, you know, even. And but this way at least I'm using the same bullet comparator and the same cartridge case comparator every time for this caliber. Now, you know, when I go to, all of a sudden I want to decide I want to load a different caliber of bullet, for a different rifle, yeah, then I have to change these out and put the ones in that fit for the new bullet in the new case. Wah. All right, so close enough. I'm not going to buy half a dozen calipers. I'm not made of money, but these calipers aren't that expensive. They're like $20 calipers, but they are Frankfurt Arsenal. That's a good brand. The one set, I've had one set for over 10 years. Just change the batteries in it. It runs. It's been perfect. You know, in terms of its performance. You know, and then I bought the other one maybe a year ago after seeing Eric say, "Oh yeah, just have two sets of calipers. You know, keep your bullet comparators and your case comparators locked into the same set of calipers, at least through one reloading session. You're not switching it out and possibly messing up your measurements." Yeah, good idea. So anyway, for 20 bucks, I do what the cool kids do, like Eric Cortina, who's one of the coolest of the cool kids, and I'll post some links to some of his videos. I think I already have some up on my website at teammosen.com. I've got a whole list of really, really great websites and links to other people's websites, people who really do know what they're doing. And yeah, and Eric Cortina is right at the top of that list of folks who are just, you know, absolutely geniuses when it comes to all this stuff, and he gets really, really good results. And that's what Eric always says. No matter what you're doing, the proof's on the paper. It doesn't matter what your calipers say. It doesn't matter all the results you have written down in your notebook and say how, you know, how precise you are in doing all this stuff. And it doesn't matter if you're, you know, buying, you know, Lapua cases that cost, you know, whatever they cost, you know, 50 cases for $100 or whatever it is, you know, for Lapua cases. It doesn't matter if you've got 2-inch groups at 100 yards. I just use regular factory good old Remington Peters cases. I've been shooting through the same lot of 1,000 cases that I bought years ago. Some of them are still new. I haven't even shot them all up yet, but some of them gotten to the point where I had to toss them. So, you know, anyway, but the point is I try to do things as consistently as possible, you know, and then I go to the range and I shoot. And if it comes out on the range where those bullets are landed one on top of the other, it doesn't matter if I'm shooting it in a 25-cent case, yeah, you know, and shooting bullets that are, you know, that cost me, you know, the 10 cents a piece. If they're all going in the same hole, that's pretty good. And again, I'm speaking mostly from a hunter's perspective. I'm not a target shooter. I don't shoot, you know, many matches. I fool around a little bit with the precision, or not precision even, team vintage sniper matches, which is a whole different ball game. But you do shoot those out to 600 yards, and I don't even reload for that rifle that I shoot those with. So, you know, it's just what it is. Everything, as I say, everything's a choice. Everything's a little bit of voodoo. You know, if you can improve what you're doing, you know, improve it. Test the results on paper. If those results bear themselves out, and all of a sudden you've got, you know, better groups, you know, by and large, all the things that you're doing on the bench, all the things that you're doing with your rifle setup, you're trying to just shrink that group, you know, from whatever everything was shooting stock factory ammunition, which a lot of times stock factory ammunition shoots very, very well in most rifles. It is really nothing wrong with it for hunting purposes. It's usually very good, extremely good in some cases, you know, and other times it may not be. But you know, in any event, what you're trying to do is, if you can, every little thing you're doing is trying to shrink that group size in increments. You know, you're just trying to shrink it. Okay, you know, you're gonna put a better scope on your rifle. Okay, that shrinks your groups a little bit because you can see better. Now you're gonna put a Timney trigger in your rifle. Okay, that shrinks your groups a little bit better because you got a little bit better trigger control. You start buying some better bullets, and by shooting better bullets, hopefully that helps to shrink your group a little bit more. You practice a lot, and you know, improve your shooting technique a little bit, and that shrinks your groups a little bit more. You know, you just do all those things, try to make everything as consistent as you can, and if the results prove themselves out on paper, then you keep doing it that way. And if that way that you're doing it involves a little bit of voodoo, you know, those kind of things. I only have one shrunken head down underneath the reloading bench here, and I've never seen a need to get two shrunken heads to stick under there, because with one, whatever the juju is that, you know, takes place on this desk with the one shrunken head under there, and all this other stuff that I'm doing, it works out on paper in terms of bullet holes, you know, being kind of hopefully one on top of the other. And again, I'm just looking for hunting purposes. I'm talking, you know, probably not shooting 300 to 400 yards at a deer at maximum. I'm not one of these long range hunters at all, and just looking for very, very good performance out to 300 or 400 yards. And then I go to the range, and I test. I've got ranges where I go to shoot to 600, 700, 800 yards, and that's just a confidence builder. If you can get really good results at those yardages in your practice with your ammunition in your rifle, then, you know, a deer at 200 yards, when you're shooting from the prone, the deer standing still, that should be a dead deer every time. You know, there should be no excuse ever for missing that deer, even though you will miss, as I know all too well. Anyway, I think that's going to kind of wrap up what we've done here for the reloading video, and just kind of go over some techniques. If you have any questions or comments, or I'm sure I'll get a ton of a ton of comments on this one. That's going to be I'll post up the kind of a preview to this, because it's a very long video. I'll put the preview on TikTok, put the link over to where the video can be found on YouTube, and for this one, and that's where you can you can leave your comments either on the preview or on the YouTube video. I don't really care. I'll be checking them both. I appreciate all of your feedback. And then I think from now on, it's probably starting with the range video that we do for the 30-06, actually shooting this ammunition. We're going to put up the finished full-length video up on Patreon. I think that's where that's going to go, so that folks can access that there, you know, and see all the other things that are going on in terms of the website and other activities. Run a lot of stuff on Patreon that I don't get to mention all the time on TikTok, and I won't be mentioning on YouTube. And so we're going to do it on Patreon, I think, for the most part, between Patreon and the website. So anyway, I appreciate your time today and watching this video, and we'll be at you again soon with a range video featuring this ammunition. Thank you.